All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our scoping plan feedback session. The purpose of this session, oh, I've got a transcript going here. That's distracting. The purpose of this feedback session is to gather initial feedback from members regarding the topics that they feel need to be further discussed at the public council meetings. And so just a reminder, these feedback sessions are not deliberative. The feedback that is gathered here will be summarized at and presented at subsequent public meetings. And we are recording these sessions and they'll be posted to the Climate Act website for transparency purposes. The topics that we have teed up to cover today are transportation, waste, and local government. And really, this is just as a refresher, we've pulled together the staff recommendation slides pertaining to these topics that were covered at the council meetings. We can use these, they're really more meant to help reorient members to the topic at hand. Staff leads are prepared to briefly overview those slides if that's helpful. And then we can open it up for council member questions and feedback. The way we're thinking of doing this is once all council members in attendance have been provided the opportunity to share their feedback on a topic or ask any clarifying questions, then we would move to the next topic and follow that same structure. So the order that we have here today is transportation, then waste, and then local government. So can I just ask the council members that are in attendance, would it be helpful for the staff leads to give a quick overview of the staff recommendations that were discussed at the public council meetings before we request your feedback, or do you want to just jump in?
I'm fine just jumping in, but I don't want to keep anybody else from hearing what they need to hear.
Okay. Donna, Gavin?
Yeah, I guess for me, I'll go with the flow, but a quick reminder would be helpful.
Okay.
I'm open to anything you want to do.
Okay. That's good. So maybe Adam, I could ask you, Adam, if I'm not seeing, oh, I'm seeing you here now. Great. Do you want to just give a quick overview of these couple of slides here? Let me know when you want me to advance them.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. And good morning, everybody. So we presented initially on the September 13th meeting and had indicated that we still needed to do some more work and put some more thought into the clean fuel standard proposal that was in the draft scoping plan based on the alternative fuels work group, and they were reporting out that same day. I'll circle back to that in just a minute on the next slide. We responded to a number of the pieces of feedback from stakeholders and the Climate Justice Working Group to add some more detail on adoption of some electrification policies, specifically a clean fleet standard, which is currently under consideration in California, and other related policies that can help focus reducing emissions in disadvantaged communities. And throughout the document, we tried to emphasize workforce development opportunities, supporting transportation electrification, as well as economic development opportunities, which was another recommendation that came up from the council at the September 13th meeting. With regard to public transportation, we clarified the emphasis on expanding transit in collaboration with supportive land use policies, which is really a cornerstone of how we are going to be able to get to the goals that we've laid out on public transportation, and noted the need to improve the rail system both on the passenger and freight side in the plan as well. Next slide. On the October 13th meeting, We came back and presented some additional details on what some considerations could be for designing a clean fuel standard, or as we decided it was probably more aptly called a clean transportation standard. And so I'm not going to go through all of the next 3 slides, but we did emphasize that we think that it is very possible to design a clean fuel standard or a clean transportation standard that addresses the main climate justice working group concerns about that type of program, that it needs to prioritize electrification and prioritize and deprioritize fuels that through combustion release harmful air pollutants, particularly any pollutants, any fuels that release more pollutants than existing petroleum-based fuels. So and also to make sure that the benefits of such a program would accrue to disadvantaged communities, and that there was a particular mechanism for that. Next slide. So unless someone wants me to walk back through all of the details here, I don't think I need to walk through these, but I do want to just talk about how we incorporated this into the draft scoping plan. We essentially took these design elements and redrafted the section on a clean fuel standard to be focused on, first of all, instructing DEC and NYSERDA to continue evaluating a variation of a clean fuel standard that would accomplish these goals. So the language in the scoping plan right now does not direct us to do that, to implement this, but to continue evaluating and considering what this could look like, how it might interact with other policy measures, especially other economy-wide measures, and continue to analyze the benefits and costs of such a policy, and then based on a benefit cost analysis and organizational capacity given other policies, DEC and NYSERDA would assess the viability, need for, and efficacy of a proposed clean transportation standard prior to commencing any regulatory process. So we also go into further detail on the design considerations that we laid out for the council on October 13th. So those are the main changes that were made to the chapter, the transportation chapter. There were a few other minor clarifications and updates related to what the state's doing that were announced in 2022 that we added, but that covers the substantive changes.
Thanks, Adam. So in any way that we want to go forward with questions or comments, that's great. I'm seeing Adam's mouth still moving in my video. I'm not sure if that's just an anomaly for me, but I'm not hearing Adam.
I'm all done.
Okay, great. Maybe the video just took a minute to catch up here. So comments or questions on the transportation edits?
I have one, but I don't need to go first, so.
Mario, I see your hand is up.
Go ahead, Mario, please.
Thanks, Donna. Look, I have something that, for my own self and for the good of everyone here, I'm just going to streamline for all 3 of the chapters. And I figure I'll just get it out of the way now, and then I'll just sit back and listen to whatever Donna or Gavin have to say. So these are for each of the 3 chapters that we're going to discuss today, and I guess for the next 4 on Thursday, and for every chapter going forward. And I know I've been a broken record. I guess I sort of just want to use this, Sarah, as just being on record for what we're going to do going forward. And this way I'll just say it once and then sit back. I know I've been a broken record when it comes to labor's position on the document as a whole. And I just want to be really clear, Sarah, I really appreciate everything that's been done so far, the progress that's been made, because I've only had the last 5 months. So I want to thank you, Sarah, truly and wholeheartedly. What I want to just do today quickly is just reiterate again, to make it as clear as possible as we're getting closer now to December, in respect to the state's position on the role of workers and unions, just to make it clear for each chapter, the 3 chapters again for today and going forward. Each chapter must include workers and their unions as key stakeholders and must include labor standards, ensuring application of robust labor protections, a job loss mitigation statement, protections for existing workers. Again, nothing that's out of the ordinary or surprising for what I haven't already said for 5 months. Protections for new positions, including prevailing rate and labor peace agreements and prohibitions of privatizing public work. Also, ensuring that the state's investment helps all New Yorkers. We call for Buy American and Buy New York requirements. And while we have to do all we can to minimize job loss, any worker who loses their job as a result of the mitigation efforts, they should be immediately reemployed with the same or better wages, benefits, conditions of employment with the same union representation. And in the key stakeholders portions of each chapter, workers and unions, they must be involved in the implementation and the execution of the requirements for each chapter, right? So any incentives for businesses, not-for-profits, they must be conditioned upon meeting all labor standards. Workplace safety and health should be prioritized through training and adoption of the most protective safety standards and practices. I will stop there, Sarah. I just wanted to say that one time. Please let that apply to each of the 3 so I don't have to take up anyone else's time. But it is important to note that there's been a tremendous amount of progress. But to make, I'll be honest, to make the labor movement really comfortable in where we are here to close this out. And you know, for each of these meetings, the months that I've been on, there hasn't been anyone who's signaled that there were any issues with this. But we do need to see it in each chapter before we get to December. And I'll just leave it at that. And thank you again, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mario. And it's not me that you should be thanking. It's the whole staff. It's certainly a team effort here. So
Thank you, everyone.
Donna, I know you had said that you had a comment or question, and then I also noticed that Anne has her hand up, and so we'll go to Anne afterwards.
The raised hand, so I'll do that.
That's okay.
Next time. Yeah. So I'll follow Mario's lead, and my comments are generally around keeping as many options available as possible. So I'm not going to go beyond that because we'll talk about it, I think, case by case. But what I wondered in this chapter, and it's just my lack of understanding, I think, and Adam talked about it. So if you go to a clean transportation standard, which you've done like on page 2, and I think on page, everywhere else, is that more narrow? Because I would wonder if would it be broader to have a clean fuel standard? And maybe they're the same, but what I was wondering is when you get to page 27 and we talk about the proposed clean transportation standard, does that allow for heavy duty vehicles that would be hard to electrify? Would that allow other fuel options for those kinds of vehicles in this kind of a standard? Because I'm wondering about allowing the possibility of hydrogen or biofuels for heavy duty or hard to electrify sectors. So that's really what I'm wondering.
Hey, Adam, you want me to take that?
You're welcome to, or I can.
Sure. Well, I mean, since it would be a DEC program, why don't I address it? That Don, I think that what we're proposing here is a variation on a traditional clean fuel standard with a couple of just sort of changes of emphasis. One is emphasis on electrification, which is largely because that is the zero carbon, fuel in New York, or will be the zero carbon fuel once we, convert the whole electricity system to zero carbon sources by 2040. So emphasis on electrification, and then for fuels, that they just need to meet this filter of the fuels that would come in through this program need to be cleaner than petroleum fuels. So, you know, we don't want to be supporting fuels that cause more air pollution than the petroleum fuels being replaced. So certainly hydrogen, you know, is you know, can fit into this. And then any other combustion fuels, you know, will be based on, you know, that evaluation of, you know, what are their pollution impacts or local impacts on local communities.
And Jared, that would happen through some sort of a rulemaking or some sort, so determining what fits and what doesn't?
Yes, it would be a rulemaking process, and then, you know, a lot would need to be fleshed out in the rulemaking itself. You know, of you know, how to really sort of operationalize that filter for cleaner fuels.
Got it. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Sure thing. You're welcome.
Any other pieces of feedback, Donna, on transportation?
I don't think so, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. We'll go to Anne now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
My camera is not working. When I turn it on, it looks like that. So I kind of have a blank look on my face. So thanks for this. I'm you know, hurriedly reading here, and I have a couple comments on the page 27 text. Well, and I like it, so I support it. One stylistic thing is there's like a lot of great commitments in that second half of the page about the elements of a desired design for a clean transportation standard, and I might suggest you break those out to highlight, because there are people so concerned about those things, that you say like the clean transportation standard, that second paragraph would have the following design elements, and then list them. I think that would make it clearer, you know, that this is what you're aiming for, as you just described, Jared. But I'd also ask if it's possible for the first paragraph on that page 27 to be like one verb stronger, meaning, could you say, DEC and NYSERDA should assess the viability, need for, and efficacy of a proposed clean transportation standard. And if the BCA is positive and the design addresses the elements listed below, commence a regulatory process. And I know I'm pushing up against the flexibility built in there about, you know, it says do this analysis prior to commencing a regulatory process, but I think it would be good to say do this analysis, and if the analysis is positive, commence a regulatory process. That's one thing. Second, I have immense sympathy for the workload of DEC and NYSERDA, but I'm wondering if anywhere else in the plan we caveat things on the organizational capacity given other priorities, like that phrase, and organizational capacity given other policies. I'm not sure is really, I mean, it's relevant to the entire plan, but I don't know if you caveat other things in the plan saying we'll do this if we have the people to do it. It's more appropriate to say this is what we plan to do.
Yeah, I think the one thing that makes this a little bit different, Anne, is the relationship between this policy and an economy-wide policy. And so, you know, those analyses are related. What additional benefit does this bring to bear? And what resources would need to be committed to provide that benefit if we were doing an economy-wide policy?
Yeah,
I think-
I
I think-
think that's valid, but I also think it would be good to capture it that way, what you just said, like the efficacy of the proposed clean transportation given other policies that are being adopted or something like that. Like if what it is you're saying how much bang for the buck does this have if we do an economy-wide policy, then maybe say that rather than saying, you know, if,
Mhm.
because I read that as given, do we have enough people to do this? The organizational capacity thing.
Right, right. And to be completely frank, that is, you know, for DEC, that is related to whether we're doing an economy-wide policy.
Yeah.
But part of the thing here, you know, and also is just sort of the sequencing. You know, we're talking about this before we've resolved whether there's going to be an economy-wide policy in the scoping plan.
Yeah.
And it's possible that once that question is resolved in some form, then that could inform, you know, inform how we draft this paragraph that you're referring to.
Yeah. Yep.
So I guess, Sarah, this is all just to get this input. We're not doing sort of, you know, to Ann's, you know, first suggestion about adding a verb or strengthening the verbs. We're not doing that kind of drafting right now. That could come out of the November 7 meeting.
That's
Right.
correct. So really, we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out kind of where are the areas that council members are most concerned about, so we can kind of tee those items up for discussion. And so, you know, so we could kind of tee up each item, you know, each chapter with its own, you know, kind of just evenly distribute the amount of time that we have in the meeting. But if there are more comments on a particular topic or subtopic, you know, we want to make sure that we're kind of leaving appropriate time for that. So, yep, kind of I'm making note of the comments as they're coming in. So I think this is more of a we heard you, we got it down, and we'll ask clarifying questions if we don't understand what the comment is. Yep.
Got it.
And did you have anything additional
Did
on
not-
transportation?
No.
Okay. Let's see. I don't know that we've heard from Gavin or Marie-Therese. Any comments on transportation?
I'm all set, thanks.
Okay.
I gotta figure out how to get my camera on again. There we go. We've provided a lot of the comments on here already, so I think we're good at this point in time. We're gonna do another scrub, but I think in preparation for the next round of comments, we're good.
Great. Okay, and so then I think moving on, we were going to hit as the next topic waste, but I understand that Sarah Crowell, who is going to be covering the local government, was unexpectedly pulled into a meeting at 11, and so we're going to switch it up and do local government first, just to respect her schedule a little bit. So again, we've got just, you know, one slide here with the staff recommendations. Sarah, do you want to maybe just give a real brief kind of run through of
Sure.
this?
Yeah, and thank you so much. I'm really sorry about the last minute switch, so thanks for accommodating. I've got some other folks who also worked on this chapter here who can also maybe speak to some of the things Mark Lowry's on, Kelly Tyler from NYSERDA. So we've got DC, NYSERDA, and DOS here to go through this. But really, as you'll recall, this slide was for both the land use and local government chapters. So they're sort of they're intertwined, and it was hard to pull them out. So although we have these bullets here, not all of these bullets were actually addressed in the local government chapter. In fact, there weren't a lot of substantial changes that we felt needed to be made based on the feedback to this particular chapter. This chapter, as you'll recall, sort of about support, you know, the state support of local government in implementing the Climate Act. So you will see if you review the chapter, you'll see we did make some, of course, editorial changes, tried to clarify some things, make some things clearer throughout, sort of not related to these comments. Particularly, there are some places just where we specified, responsibility where that wasn't specified in the original. As you all know, it was a somewhat rushed, process. So this was a great opportunity to try to clean some stuff up. So there are some of the red in here is really just cleanup. But where you will see some more, I think where the substantial changes are related to touching on afforestation and reforestation, and also on the renewable energy siting bullets. There was a desire to sort of further stress the need to be mindful of the potential conflict between agricultural and forested lands and renewable energy sightings. So there we did add some specific recommendations a specific recommendation related to that under energy siting support, that model local laws should be developed that minimize the impact of clean energy siting on forests. We also added some language sort of about forest and ag land. We also added some language throughout just to sort of stress that the importance and the awareness of that issue. There was also there was a request we wanted to emphasize the role of entities other than just the local government itself. So some of the sub entities or bodies within local government, climate action. Climate conservation committees. There are so many different ones, but CACs, EMCs, so the sort of local and regional bodies, and also NGOs and land trusts. So we added some language about supporting those bodies in addition to just local government, sort of in general. And I believe that is it. I mean, the point, there was a point made sort of consistently about the importance of recognizing the differences between sort of lower capacity communities and larger communities, smaller communities, larger communities, rural, urban. So, those are very situational, and to the best of our ability, we sort of added language within this chapter to emphasize the need to provide meaningful support at a variety of levels and capacities. I hope we sort of got that to the level that folks would want to see it, but I'll stop talking. That's sort of where we are. So if anyone any comments, questions, suggestions?
Thanks, Sarah. And just to clarify, so this is the slide that came from, this was as it was presented at our September 13th meeting, and we had combined it to cover land use and local government. So some of these, you'll see this again when we talk about local government or land use.
Yeah. Right.
At a later session. So just wanted you to understand that not all of these elements will show up as changes in the local government chapter. Yep. But opening it up for feedback or questions from council members.
Hi, Sarah. This is Rory. Apologies for my tardiness in joining late. Just want to clarify, what section are we discussing right now?
We're talking about the local government chapter.
Local government chapter. Got it. Okay.
Can I ask a question about something on page 3, or are we still to discuss?
Go for it.
Okay, I'm sorry. So under the components of the strategy, the form a community working group, again, there should be workforce representation within the group. Some note of workforce representation. Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So Sarah, this is Rory. We're talking about the local government chapter. I just want to confirm that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I use the comment sheet, so I can send that over to you if that hasn't made its way to you yet. One just kind of general concern I had with the nature of this chapter, there seemed to be a significant emphasis on the development and deployment of clean energy, which I'm a big fan of, and I thank you for that. But there seemed to be very limited discussion on encouraging energy efficiency in any meaningful way, shape, or form. And that was a major concern for me throughout the chapter. I do think local governments can play a very significant role in promoting energy efficiency, both in their own buildings, acting as a leader in the community to show it can be done, but also through local ordinances encouraging energy efficient building practices, renovations, and operation of buildings in their jurisdiction. So just wanted to flag that as something I was a little concerned to not see as greatly emphasized that I felt it could be. And that I think in many ways that should be the emphasis and lead up to any discussion on clean energy. Because the more efficient you make the buildings in a community, the less clean energy they would ultimately need, and the more efficiently that clean energy would ultimately be used. So.
Absolutely. I think that makes sense. I think we certainly did intend to include that. I absolutely agree that that's a role that local government should have, and can have. And I think we can probably look through and potentially find some places to strengthen that and maybe call out efficiency particularly. I'm looking through it now and I see support building electrification, but I think, but that's not efficiency. Obviously, I think we can probably add that language.
Perfect. Okay, I have some, again, I'll send you the Excel file with my comments. One comment I do want to flag for the group on page 5 and 6. You specifically name a CCA provider, and I just would generally caution against naming individual providers of any kind of service in the document, and simply suggest changing the name and incorporating a change that suggests several CCAs are in operation in New York State, rather than naming one outright. For a variety of reasons, that worries me. Specifically, it may suggest favoritism, and it may ultimately be used in inappropriate ways after the publication. So.
Yep. Got it.
Question on page 2 under the key strategies to support local climate action section. There's mention of a dashboard that is going to be created, a community GHG dashboard. Is the dashboard collecting data for government facilities and operations only, or for everything in a particular community? It wasn't clear to me from reading which direction that was going.
The goal is to be community-wide, although there are challenges, obviously, which are, which we recognize in the language. It's going to be challenging, but the goal is community-wide.
Got it. Okay. If it is community-wide, it may be helpful to reference some of the challenges regarding data security and data collection, and just data privacy in general. And who actually is going to be owning the data. I don't have that particular section in front of me. I only have my notes, but I believe the recommendation was that NYSERDA collect the data. And if that's the case, that's fine. But if it were to be a local community collecting the data, that may create some other issues in other ways.
Okay. Yeah, no, the goal is for NYSERDA with DEC to collect that data.
Then on
Sure.
Yeah, on page 5, I was a little confused by the community clean energy initiatives. Is it clean energy communities or is it something separate? I know clean energy communities was mentioned, and I wasn't sure if it was the same as a community clean energy initiative. But in reading that gave me enough confusion where I just wanted to flag that.
It's intended to be sort of more broadly community clean energy initiatives. Of course, the Clean Energy Communities program is a way to do that, to help communities achieve clean energy. But we can go through and try to with an eye to that comment and see if there's anything that needs to be clarified.
Any other items, Rory? Are you, I see you scanning. I'm not sure whether you're.
Yeah, I'm
okay.
getting my files together to send to
Okay,
you.
yep.
I put them together and circulated among staff just to get additional feedback. And I'll share the final versions to you shortly. I have no further comments for now.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anything else from other council members? Anne?
Yeah, thanks. I had something small. On page 5, where it says create model local laws and regulations, it mentions the solar industry, and sort of by virtue of that implies that these local laws and regulations are about solar exclusively. But in fact, I think it would be helpful to have model local laws about solar, wind, which exist already, but need to be updated. Transmission, battery storage, even on Rory's point about energy efficiency and building decarbonization, building code stuff there. So maybe that should make more broad, like clean energy industry. And similarly, on page 7 at the top on the bullet that's reduced grid interconnection costs, that's relevant also for storage and even for like EV fast chargers. So again, evaluating options to reduce interconnection costs, totally in favor of, but maybe say with the clean energy industry and sort of imply that it's not just solar interconnection, it's also any renewables, fuel cells, whatever. Yeah, that's it for me.
Sense. Got it. And on the model local laws, I think that's a good point to broaden the industry reference. I think this section, because it's on clean energy siting, probably wouldn't incorporate model local laws on related to efficiency. So we might, but that we may be able to reference that elsewhere in the chapter. Instead, add something about model local laws related to efficiency and talk about building code adoption and that kind of thing elsewhere.
Yeah.
I'll have to look through it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else on local government? All right, well, not hearing any, I think we'll move to waste. So I'll go back a couple slides here. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, thanks. I'm hopping off, so appreciate you switching things.
No problem. And for waste, I believe we have David Vitale from DEC. David, do you want to maybe just give a quick rundown of the waste changes that we're seeing in the chapter?
Sure. So for waste, the adjustments relate to 4 basic categories. One is increased funding legislation and programs for waste reduction, reuse, and recycling. So there's identification of legislation to support a disposal disincentive surcharge to fund waste reduction, reuse, and recycling. There's support for efforts for reduction of single-use plastics, expanding reusable, refillable options, other recycling, reduction and recycling types of program areas. The second larger category is legislation for comprehensive EPR. So one of the biggest ones would be support of the paper and packaging EPR, extended producer responsibility, and ultimately a framework for EPR for multiple products to more rapidly and easily include that concept for other products. Third one is a larger category related to amendment to the food donation and food scraps recycling law. So it'd be amending the law to phase in the smaller food waste generators, removing exemptions, eliminating the 25-mile requirement for recyclers. And there's a lot of supporting components for program enhancement identified in there as well. And the fourth larger one is regulations to support enhanced greenhouse gas leak monitoring and reduction at solid waste facilities. So that would be comprehensive regulations to require greenhouse gas emissions and for monitoring for greenhouse gas emissions and reduction of leaks. So we've tried to incorporate under those four categories the supporting recommendations and issues from the discussions from the council members that we heard and from recommendations from the Climate Justice Advisory Group. So it falls into those basic categories.
Thank you, David. Anne, I see your hand is up. I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand though.
It is.
Okay. Next up, we've got Rory.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. So again, I shared my comments earlier, but generally speaking, two things rose of concern to me. You know, in various chapters throughout, there's mention of the desire for a circular economy. And I think that's mentioned in this chapter, but I was surprised that it didn't seem to be heavily emphasized, and certainly not as heavily emphasized as the agriculture chapter, which definitely talked about the circular economy in a little bit more of a robust way. So I just wanted to flag that as a potential area for additional emphasis, just as the narrative continues to be developed. Second item, so there's a reference at one point to no significant new transmission infrastructure, and that's in relation to the use of RNG. And you know, I always worry about qualifiers like significant, in part because I know a 10-mile gas pipeline to some can be just as significant as a 1,000-mile gas pipeline. So I felt it'd be important to just qualify what we mean by significant and what its impacts could be, to just kind of, you know, make sure that we're not backing ourselves into any particular corners. And on that note, you know, I think the intent ultimately is to limit emissions, right? And I don't know if Bob Haworth is on this call. I don't see his name, but Bob has provided a good amount of information on feedstock and approaches to biogas that can lead to lower emissions. And I feel that this chapter does a good job of incorporating that in. So kudos to the drafters on that. But one area where I think would be helpful would be to have a more robust discussion on the need for monitoring the pipelines themselves. You know, ensuring that you know, appropriate gas monitoring and leak detection systems are in place, and that anything produced in part for use in the circular economy minimize its release into the atmosphere to ensure that it's all, or as much as possible, is used in that circular fashion. So again, another emphasis on leak detection I think would be helpful there. And in my final comment, just a general comment at large, there seems to be a great emphasis on capturing waste, managing waste, using waste, reusing waste. But I felt that the desire to just generate less waste, that particular focus did not seem to be present. And that was very concerning, because I know there's recognition in the chapter that we're going to need to change consumer habits, but I don't think we really highlighted just how significant those changes would need to be from a consumer perspective. Meaning, it's one thing to use a cleaner fuel or participate in a circular economy, but if you're using so much of it, you make a fairly big circular economy that could be a lot more efficient. So just talking about using less in general and making sure that the inputs, not just the energy themselves, but the packaging, the delivery mechanisms, all those things that go into getting a product from point A to B and then, manufactured, distributed, utilized, making sure that those are as efficient as possible and minimize waste. I think that's an emphasis we should aim to add to this chapter.
Got it. Thank you. Gavin.
David, nice job with this. Couple comments though, and more clarification. On page 10, the top of page 10, talk about the applicability of zero emission electricity requirements and specifics of how it will be implemented after 2040, which would be addressed by the PSC. At our last council meeting, Peter Iwanowitz recommended that DEC be part of that collaboration. And since this is a solid waste management program, I would think some sort of consultation with DEC, with the PSC, since we're talking about reducing emissions. To get to Rory's point, the connection there is more of a wording issue than a substantive issue. So I wanted to raise that on page 10. On page 15, in the paragraph before components of the strategy, there's a statement, and this is just more of a consistency issue again. The end of life management of solar panels and large scale batteries. Later in the chapter, we reference solar, wind turbines, batteries. We left wind out here. More of a consistency between the languages on page 15. One more comment goes to page 23. The issue in the words about biogas and the need for biogas capture and alternative fuels, I think for the gas transition chapter and the forestry chapter, which I'm not on the committee for forestry, that the language should be consistent between the different chapters about what we're talking about. There's some inconsistencies about that in the gas transition chapter, this chapter, and the forestry chapter. The thrust of what we're doing here, I'm very supportive of. And again, to start where I started, or end where I started, I thought you did a very good job on this. So those are my observations of the chapter.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. All right. And then I think Anne, your hand looks like it's back up.
Well, didn't know if I did that on purpose, but I will say, number one, I really support what Rory was saying in terms of emphasis, and I also support having DEC added to that part that Gavin mentioned. So I'm sitting here nodding my head, I guess, and putting my hand down.
I missed something here that I think is a concern to me, and maybe I was too I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Is Anne done?
It looked like Anne was done. She's back on mute.
Right. Back on 23, page 23. I skipped over something I probably shouldn't have. The sentence in the middle of the paragraph, the on-site use of biogas captured from waste management should be prioritized, and no significant new transmission infrastructure should be allowed. That is the language that I do have some concern about, because I don't know if we're there yet, and it's inconsistent with the chapters that I've mentioned earlier.
I amplify and echo Gavin's statement. That lines up with my concern as well.
Sorry for butting in. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And Sarah, if it's okay. Oh, sorry.
I was going to go to Donna, since Donna did have her hand up.
Go
but
ahead, Rory, please, please.
No. This can wait till we're done because it's something else in the chapter.
Okay. So page 23, I kind of had the same comments that Gavin just had and that Rory, that you echo, just trying to conform this with what we've said in the gas transition chapter, because I think there was a lot of discussion there about it. And then this was a minor one. This is in W9, that paragraph, about 2/3 of the way down, same sentence, the on-site use of biogas captured, et cetera, et cetera. Earlier on page 16, we said the on-site and local use. I would conform those if we agree, just to be consistent. So the 16 says the on-site and local use of biogas or RNG. So that's what I would suggest, just to conform them. Again, just trying to keep these options on the table. And then I had two general questions or comments, I guess. One is, when I read the transportation chapter, I was struck by T12, which is the market-based fuel policy discussion. And I wondered where, and if it might be here, we might consider adding something about considering some sort of a market-based policy to provide incentives for projects that would reduce or collect emissions. So back to Rory's comment about the circular economy, you know, the difficulty maybe in some instances of the expense of some of the facilities to collect the methane that would otherwise be, you know, going to atmosphere. So you know, the specific suggestion that I think I've raised before would be something like a low carbon fuel standard, or and I know we haven't, we don't have a chapter on this, renewable gas standard, something to provide an incentive or an economic development incentive to investors to kind of help New York reach the goal. So just, I'm wondering if we could at least consider saying that something like that should be evaluated. And I think for dairy as well, when we get to it, I don't think we're there yet. So that was one. I wondered if it might fit somewhere after page 9, where we talk about waste reduction, reuse, and recycling, or the next section, W1, where it's organic waste reduction and recycling. So the challenge is, you know, for financially getting these projects in place. So that was one. The other one is whether we could add something or should add something about, you know, considering, to the extent that we do have investment like that, that we consider the policy accounting to consider avoided emissions when we're looking at this sector. And I think this came up during the alternative fuels discussion when we had the subgroup. Could there be some discussion? Let me just find where I have it. And I was going to suggest on page 24, at the end of the first bullet, so it's that top bullet, we could say something like using full life cycle analysis when assessing greenhouse gas impacts from a policy implementation perspective. But Sarah, I will populate the matrix and send it to you, but I wanted to raise it here as something to just, I think it's something important to mention somewhere. I don't know if this is the right chapter.
Okay. Anything else, Donna, on waste?
No, nothing else here.
Okay. Moving on to Mario.
I just, on page 23, I just wanted to back up what Gavin said about the infrastructure piece.
Okay. Okay, and then I think we're back to Rory.
Thanks. Again, this is in my notes, but I wanted to flag it because, again, it's just, it goes to kind of just a direction. The chapters, refrigerant diversion, W5, pages 17 and 18. So my first comment has to do with the title of the chapter. So I suggest modifying it to read refrigerant monitoring, leak detection, reduction, and diversion, in part because, yes, we do want to reduce the use and increase diversion, but we can't, if we're not monitoring it, how do we know we're being successful? And I think it's going to be important, given that we're going to be using far more refrigerants going forward, that we make robust efforts to monitor and manage those leaks as well, given the GWP potential of those refrigerants. And then in components of strategy, I also recommend adding a monitoring and tracking of HFC leaks as a strategy for reduction, again, along the same vein. And, you know, this, I think, echoes what I was saying earlier about kind of directionally. I think, and to our credit, I think this is a great way to look at it. We're definitely looking ahead at what do we need to, for the infrastructure that's coming to be as best utilized as possible. But I think it's also going to be to our benefit to make sure that we're looking at the infrastructure that's already here and making sure that that's as effectively used as well. And it's a slight distinction, but I think that'll be helpful in making sure that we're attacking the problem of climate change from both directions, both making sure that as new things come in, it's the best of class as we can, but also for instances where there are issues with or delays or reasons for not moving forward in a timely manner, that what's already there can be addressed in some way, and we can at least establish a baseline for future performance. So just kind of wanted to make that point clear, because that, I think, echoes much of my reasoning throughout much of the chapters I've read thus far.
Got it. Thank you, Rory. Any other feedback from council members on the waste chapter? All right, I think that would take us through the end of the agenda of what we were trying to cover here. But since we do have folks, I'll just say, you know, a couple folks joined maybe a little bit late. Do we want to revisit any of the topics? I'm not sure, Rory, if you wanted to voice any of your thoughts on transportation. Happy to go back to that if you'd like to.
I would appreciate it if you don't mind. And I'll make it quick, because again, most of my comments are in the sheet I sent. But I'm not sure if this was discussed, but I have a general concern regarding VMT and its use, vehicle miles traveled and its use. And this may be in part because of my own ignorance. But I recognize that we want to reduce vehicle miles traveled. But I don't know to what degree mass transit and other forms of public transportation are part of the vehicle miles traveled conversation. I can easily imagine a scenario where mass transit vehicle miles travels increases through much of what we propose. And if our goal is to reduce VMT writ large, is that at odds with that approach? So not sure if anyone can answer that question on the call right now, but just wanted to raise that as an underlying concern I had.
Jared, are you able to maybe take that? Or Carolyn?
Sure, I can take that, and Carolyn can, or Carolyn. I'll just start. I think transit is a VMT reduction strategy. That, you know, just the idea of you get, you know, 20 people riding in a bus instead of 20 different cars, you're reducing VMT and the associated emissions. So I'd say both the sort of transit type recommendations and the smart growth type recommendations are all sort of related to that goal of reducing how much we need to drive. Carolyn, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that the VMT goal was primarily related to you know, single occupancy passenger vehicles, and certainly as Jared suggests, the use of public transit is an opportunity and it would not be considered in the VMT reduction conversation. It's the solution. It's not one of the priority areas to focus on.
Got it. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I again, not knowing how VMT is calculated, I wasn't sure if there was a potential for conflict in metrics if we were to see an uptick in mass transit VMT in some way. But again, you guys are the experts, so that's fine. The other question I had to do more with the framing of mass transit. So much of what's discussed in this chapter talks about enhancing use of existing mass transit options, and the discussion on potentially expanding mass transit options to new areas was a bit limited. I forget the exact terms that were used. Yeah, I forget the exact terminologies that were used, but I feel that we have an opportunity here to amplify those newer options in this chapter as alternatives to existing mass transit. And I think that's important because, to be perfectly frank, I know outside of New York City, the perception of mass transit is rather not as positive in certain communities. And I think if we highlight that it's not mass transit as you may think of it, but it could be shared, here we go, shared mobility and micro transit services. If we can highlight those that are going to be available to a greater extent, I think that'll be helpful in advancing the recommendations of this chapter more wholeheartedly.
I think
All
I think
right.
that makes sense, Rory and Sarah. We'll work on that, adding some more example language like that to clarify what those public transportation enhancements could be.
Thanks, Carolyn. And just a reminder, this is, we don't want to start making any of the changes on the red lines just yet. We'll have the discussion at the November 7th council meeting, and where we have agreement from the council to make the changes, that we'll move forward there. But I do appreciate you kind of considering where we could make some of those adjustments, if that's supported by the council. All right. Anything else from any of the council members? I guess regarding any of the topics, any remaining feedback that you have while we have you here?
Sarah, can I just ask a process question?
Sure.
We've all spent a lot of time in the last few months in these working groups and coming up with recommendations, and I think we've all tried to work well with each other to be thoughtful and address language issues to capture people's priorities. I don't remember how it was said, but at the last council meeting, there was issues around relitigating or rediscussing issues at the council level that maybe we don't agree with. I mean, we just spent an hour improving this chapter, these various chapters. What's the thinking on this? I mean, are we so done with transportation and waste and local government at this point as council members? I just trying to understand where we're going.
Yeah, so I would say not necessarily. So the meeting on November 7th will cover these chapters as well as the other chapters that were sent to you on Friday, Ag and Forestry. I'm not going to get them all right, so I'm going to just stop there, but kind of with that group. So the November 7th meeting is intended we'll try to capture kind of the feedback that was already provided, but really we're hoping it will be a discussion of the council members to kind of say, okay, on transportation, these are the pieces of feedback we heard. Members at that meeting can also kind of share additional feedback or context around any of their suggestions for improvement, and then I expect that Doreen and Basil will also, as co-chairs, offer some direction on kind of how they would like to see the chapter modified or not. And so following those meetings, I would say following the meeting on the 7th, I would say the majority of your work on these chapters is kind of put to bed. However, we are looking to then, by the end of November, having a revised kind of second set of red lines go out that will be kind of the whole document. The second set of red lines kind of addressing any of these comments that are being discussed at the November sessions. I don't know if that was clear enough. Happy to try to go to any more level of detail if it would be helpful. Donna?
Yeah, I might
Yeah.
jump in for a second to,
Oh, go ahead,
to
please.
just, I think the intention is that we're funneling down. So right now you're seeing a lot of red lines and you don't have comments on all of them. Most of them are perfectly fine. So these comments now that come out in November are what will be presented in December. And there'll be a smaller subset of things that still are, council members say, yep, okay, I like the way that looks now, or I don't, right? And that's what we discuss in December. So it's sort of funneling down into any areas where council members still need a little more time to think about issues.
But Gavin, to your point, and maybe this isn't where you were going, but I will say that, you know, there was a lot of effort put into the subgroups and all of that process this summer. And so, you know, while council members are free to bring up any issues that they want to discuss at the council meetings, I guess I would sincerely hope that we can take that, you know, really good work that was done in the subgroups and that it's accurately reflected throughout the whole document. And so I would say, you know, it would be my preference to not have to relitigate some of these issues, but instead we're talking about more appropriately incorporating them throughout the whole document. But as I said, you know, council members can bring up any areas of concern that they have.
And Sarah, that was really the gist of my question as well. I hope that there's a way to recognize the work that was done at the subgroups and the number of discussions and meetings and how many of us were involved. So I hope that that's considered.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry to belabor this. So I'm just gonna throw a word out. Zero emissions, renewable natural gas, biogas, all these things that we've talked about for months. What you're telling me, Sarah, is that in practice on Tuesday or at some point between now and December 19th, we could relitigate all this at the council's table, is what you're saying. Is that what I took away from this?
Yes, that's literally what I'm saying is any topic could be brought up. I believe that Doreen and Basil will want to kind of contain the conversation or limit the conversation to, you know, things that we have not yet fully discussed that need more discussion. So I guess while it's a possibility that anything could be brought up, I expect it, you know, that I would hope that we could focus on kind of newer, you know, kind of did we capture it correctly within the scoping plan, or did we miss something in the scoping plan regarding it, but not necessarily kind of reopening the whole issue. And that's just kind of what I anticipate, you know, Doreen and Basil as co-chairs would want to kind of take the direction of the conversation. But you know, I can't obviously speak for all council members and where their most significant concerns are. Any other questions or comments before we wrap? All right, well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your feedback. And as a reminder, we do have another session this afternoon on these same topics. And then I believe on Thursday, we have sessions both at 10 and at 2 on the drafts that were sent out on Friday. So thank you for your participation, and we'll get this recording posted to our website as well. Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye now.
Take care.
Bye.